Well, good evening, everyone. It's 7 o'clock, so I think we will make a start. Thank you. Good evening, and welcome to tonight's meeting of the Hedge End, West End and Botley Local Area Committee. My name is Councillor Cllr Garton, and I will be chairing the meeting this evening. Councillors are reminded that to take part in this meeting, you must have an open mind so that you can take all the relevant considerations presented to the meeting into account in reaching your decision. By attending today, you have decided that you will listen to all points of view expressed by the speakers and public and are able to participate and cannot be seen to have predetermined the applications. This meeting will be recorded and will be uploaded to the Council's website. If any members of the public prefer not to be recorded, then do please contact a member of staff. If you are planning on filming or recording the meeting, then do please let us know so that we can ensure you are not filming members of the public that do not wish to be filmed. The Chair reserves the right to ask any filming considered intrusive to be stopped. More information is available on the Council's website. We always welcome people to speak at the meeting, although this is a formal committee meeting of Eastleigh Borough Council and not a public meeting. The members of the public that have registered to speak will be invited to speak at the relevant agenda item and will be given a total of 3 minutes to speak. We use a traffic light system, and when the light is amber, they have 1 minute remaining. People wishing to speak on an item on the agenda are able to do so before the debate starts. Once the debate has started, however, it is not possible to invite or receive comments from the floor. We want to be as inclusive as possible, but will not tolerate any disruptions to our meeting. So, we'll start with item 1 on the agenda, and that's apologies. Nikki, do you have any apologies?
We have apologies from Councillor Welsh.
Thank you very much, Nikki. Right, item 2, declarations of interest. Do members have any declarations of interest they wish to make? If so, please indicate now, and when called, please state the nature and reason for the interest. You can, of course, declare any interests as they occur to you in the meeting. Councillor Kinloch.
Declaring an interest in item 8 as an immediate neighbour.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kinloch. When we get to that item, I will ask you if you can move away from the table. Thank you. Right. Next item on the agenda is item 3, which is the minutes. And I would like to move that they are a true record of the meeting held on the 9th of September 2024. Do I have a proposer, please? Thank you, Cllr Gomer, seconded by Councillor Kinloch. All agreed? Thank you, that's unanimous. Right, we are now going to move on to item 4, which is public participation. We have 3 members of the public, I'll just take that off there, thank you, who have requested to speak on this item. And as I said before, we use a traffic light system and you will have 3 minutes. The first person who's registered to speak is Amanda Winstone. Amanda, would you like to come to the microphone, please? Thank you.
Thank you and good evening. We want to talk to you today about the...
Excuse me, sorry, I think we need to turn the microphone on.
Is that okay? Yeah. Yes, thank you. Sorry about that. So, we'd like to speak to you today about the new barriers installed at Itchen Valley Country Park and the safety issues around our horses entering the bridle route. I've been paying for and using the bridle route at Itchen Valley Country Park for over 4 years. It was the first time I'd ever been to the bridle route when I rode out, but I quickly realised that it wasn't just somewhere I could ride my horse, it was a really brilliant community feel, chatting to other park visitors, seeing the kids, seeing our horses riding out. It's just great. And on the back of using the bridle route, I've also started going to events at the at the country park, supporting local traders, charities. We use the axe throwing. We always visit the cafe afterwards. We always recommend that people use the country park when we're at Russell's Equestrian Centre, which is where my horse is based. So my point here is that I'm one rider, but on the back of using the bridle route, I'm bringing a much bigger impact to the community and a financial impact to the country park. Using the bridle route is an amazing mental well-being for me and for my horse. It's just a great experience. Once the barriers are working, I will not be able to safely navigate round them to enter the bridle route. There isn't enough room. I'm not willing to risk my horse's safety, and I'm not willing to risk anyone else using the park's safety. The British Horse Society have visited the site and agree that there is a significant safety concern for equines and the location of the barriers. During the planning permission, we understand that no risk assessment for the change of access to include passing the barriers for equines was made. It's well known that Gleneagles Equestrian Centre have a reasonable adjustment made when the entrance to the bridle route from Allington Lane was deemed too dangerous. They were provided a new entrance so that they could safely use the bridle route. We're asking for the same consideration, that we are able to safely enter and exit the bridle route. Otherwise, riders riding out from Russell's Equestrian Centre are being unfairly excluded from using the bridle route. There are some alternatives. We've proposed some alternatives around the new barriers. Really hope that we can collaborate to solve this problem so that we can continue to use the bridle route. Horses have been welcomed on Itchen Valley Country Park from the day it was opened. It would be devastating to lose that ability to use it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Amanda. And I believe our next speaker, Carol Bolton, is speaking about the same subject. Yep, thank you.
Good evening, councillors. For anybody who doesn't know me, I'm Carol Bolton. I own Russell Equestrian Centre, and we're celebrating our 50th year in business this year. We've been using Itchen Valley Country Park riding route since it was opened, and I think most of the councillors will have had our leaflet showing my daughter at the age of 9 riding her horse round Itchen Valley Country Park. It's been a wonderful use. It's been wonderful for us, and also for people seeing horses and riders. We're part of the countryside. Now, I'm afraid that when the barriers were put in, the needs of horses and riders were not taken into consideration. We were very disappointed. There was no consultation. We are right opposite the entrance to Itchen Valley Country Park, for goodness sake. Somebody pop across and talk to us. These barriers, when they go in and when they're operational, will be actually dangerous for horses. And this is why I brought this along tonight. This is the width we're being allowed. And this is the width of our largest horse. And you see there's not a lot of play there, is there? If somebody's leading a horse, they're going to fit into that bit. And it's solid. The box, the electric box, is solid. It's not like the vegetation at the entrance of the riding path. It's absolutely solid, and you've got a moving barrier. And the barrier is triggered by cars coming up. Now, we've been in touch with the manufacturer of the barriers, and they say they are not suitable to have horses and riders go past because the barriers are triggered to fall when there's an absence of car. As soon as the car's gone through, the barrier falls. Now, imagine you're trying to ride past there and this barrier's going to drop. That's dangerous. Now, we've had access to a really important facility. It's the only off-road riding in the whole of this area. We've had access to that relatively safely, and now it's not safe. So we're asking, there is an alternative, there is a fairly cheap way of doing things. Please, can we be consulted, and we'll try and work something out, because at the moment the situation is very bad, and we've only been advised, if we don't like it, don't use it. Well, so much for inclusivity. And we've also been told, take your horses up Allington Lane to the other entrance. Well, the entrance on Allington Lane is so dangerous, and that was the reason Glen Eagles were given a separate private entrance, because Allington Lane was too dangerous. So please, can we be treated properly in this, and can you consult with us, and let's get an absolute ending to this silliness, going backwards and forwards about it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Carol and Amanda. As I'm sure you can appreciate that we not having the necessary information in front of us from the country park, we will have to refer this back to them and obviously get the information from them as well. But I certainly appreciate you both coming along this evening and presenting your case to the committee, because obviously there are certain questions that need to be answered. So thank you both very much, and we will refer it back. And I know our local area manager here, Ross McLean, will take it up for you. Okay, thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Right, we did have a third person registered to speak in public questions, but it doesn't look like they've turned up. So we'll move on. So we'll go on to the chair's report. On the 9th of October, I went along with colleagues to the reopening of Wilden Leisure Centre. I was very impressed with the new facilities and the way they have utilised the space to increase the number of exercise stations. I know the refurbished gym has already attracted lots of interest, and I hope it will encourage more people in the community to become more active and use the gym. Well done to the team at Wilden Leisure Centre, and well done for carrying out the refurbishment so quickly with minimal disruption to the users. The deadline for applications to the HeWeb Community Grants closed last week, and we received 23 applications with a combined request of over £10,000. It was really good to see a wide variety of applications across West End, Hedge End and Botley being submitted. The grant panel reviewed the applications received, and we hope to be able to approve successful applications at the next HeWeb LAC on the 27th of January. On the subject of HeWeb grants, our youth grant scheme opens this month, so I would encourage any community groups working with young people to review our funding criteria and submit an application for HeWeb to consider. I also attended the official opening of the new coffee shop in Botley Park called Gather. It was officially opened by our very own Deputy Mayor, Councillor Cllr Asman, who cut the ribbon, and I believe will be cutting lots of ribbons in the future. Councillor Kinloch, Cllr Kyrle and Cllr Pretty were also there. And can I say that the coffee is excellent, although there are obviously, as we say, there are other coffee shops available, but it's very good, and I have been back since, and it was great to see so many people in there, young families, single people on their own with their laptops out, obviously working as they do, but it was really good. Thank you. I have been concerned by recent ASB antisocial behaviour reports around the Downs Farm area, and I know my colleagues are talking to residents to understand the issues and discussing ideas on how we can prevent these actions. At our next HeWeb team meeting, Chief Inspector Matt Paling will provide members with an update on the work the police are conducting to address the issue. I attended the Hedge End Remembrance Service on Sunday and laid a wreath on behalf of Eastleigh Borough Council to honour those who gave their lives in 2 world wars and all other conflicts across the world. And I understand that many of our members here also laid wreaths yesterday. So thank you. Christmas is just around the corner, I hasten to add, and there are a range of festive events and activities to look out for. The Christmas lights for Hedge End Village switch on is the 21st of November. West End is the 29th of November, and Botley Village has carols in the square on the 8th of December. The Bury Theatre is also presenting There's a Monster in Your Christmas Show from the 13th to the 24th of December, based on the book by Tom Fletcher on this very stage. But please don't worry, we don't have to join in. Finally, I was really pleased to see so many good news in the stories in the local area managers report this time, which shows how this committee supports lots of community projects and initiatives in our He Web area. Thank you. Right, let's move on to item 6 then, which is presentation of planning guidelines, and I'm going to invite David Huckfield to give the presentation. David, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So, if I can get this to work. Okay, start again, sorry. So this is a brief presentation on how planning applications are considered and determined. So, planning applications must be considered on planning grounds. The committee must determine proposals in line with the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. The development plan for the borough is formed of the policies of the Eastleigh Borough Local Plan 2016 to 2036, which was adopted in April 2022. The Hampshire Minerals and Waste Plan also forms part of the development plan, although it's not relevant to any of our applications this evening. There's also a range of other relevant considerations that can be taken into account in determining planning applications. These include supplementary planning documents, which cover a range of matters, including quality places, parking standards, planning obligations, trees and development, etc., and relevant government policy, which includes the National Planning Policy Framework and its presumption in favour of sustainable development. The National Planning Policy Framework, or the NPPF, is a material consideration of significant weight that takes precedence over development plan policies which do not accord with the framework. The latest iteration of the NPPF was published in December 2023. It sets out a range of key planning requirements, and they're listed on the screen there. So delivering sustainable development without delay, meeting housing needs, promoting the growth of the economy, requiring high standards of design and preventing or mitigating impacts. It also includes a presumption in favour of sustainable development unless the adverse impacts of development outweigh its benefits. And it contains 3 threads of sustainability, so economic, social and environmental. These are interdependent and need to be pursued in mutually supportive ways. In addition to policy and associated supplementary planning guidance, there's also a range of other material considerations. These include planning history, so previous applications or decisions that are relevant to a proposal, any relevant appeal decisions, site-specific matters, so highways, impacts, residential amenity, ecology, drainage, etc., any consultee and third-party comments, so neighbour representations, as well as precedents, so current case law. There's also a raft of non-planning issues which can't be taken into account in determining planning applications. Again, some sort of key examples on the screen there, so devaluation of property, breaches of covenant, anything covered by other legislation, or any civil matters, so sort of boundary disputes or anything like that. And in making a decision this evening, members, any decisions that are made contrary to the recommendation of the officer must be explained and minuted with clear reasons given, and that's whether it's approved or refused. Members, in addition, have the option to defer an application for consideration at a future meeting. This may be to seek amendments or further information, but the committee must indicate their reasons for that deferral. Members also have the option to add further controls on use and details if required. So that might be through conditions or planning obligations, if these are considered to be reasonable in planning terms. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, David. So we will move to agenda item 7, which is our first planning application for Hatts Copse Farm, and I will ask David to present the report. David, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So our first planning item tonight is for Hatts Copse Farm, which is in Brook Lane in Botley, and it's for the construction of 2-bedroom bungalow with adjoining garages following the demolition of existing annex and outbuildings. So this is a sort of wider aerial photo to provide a bit of context to the location of the site so we can see where we are in the borough. So the site's sort of marked by the red arrow you can see in the centre of the screen. It's the western side of Brook Lane, which runs sort of north to south in this location. And in this part of that lane, it contains ribbon development to its western side. The site falls within designated countryside and settlement gap within the council's adopted local plan. And the gap in this location separates the settlements of Hedge, which you can sort of see the edge of to the west, and Botley, which is just off the screen to the northeast. This is a sort of closer up view of the site location, which you can see here outlined in red. So the site's set to the rear of that ribbon development that I mentioned on the previous slide. We've got Brook Lane just in here. The site is accessed via a private driveway, which runs between these two residential properties, and that leads to Hatscop's Farm, which is the sort of larger main dwelling that's on the site, and it's got a courtyard area to its frontage, which is just in here. And there's a range of outbuildings, which you can see just in there, and I'll show some images of those to give a bit of further context on the following slides. So this is a sort of bird's eye view of the site. So this is the main dwelling at Hatscop's Farm, which you can see just in here. And you can see the range of outbuildings more clearly in that photo. The building that is sort of outlined in red there is the building that's referred to in the submission as the annex. That's what it's known as. But for clarity, that dwelling does have an authorised use as an independent dwelling, which has been established through a lawful development certificate, which was issued by the council last year. So in effect, the proposals members are considering tonight are for a replacement dwelling, a replacement of that property. As I said, there's the sort of outbuildings that are in here, and you've got the access drive, which runs off Brook Lane up into the main sort of courtyard area of the site. Off that access drive, there is also a sort of a spur, if you like, which comes in here, which is sort of disused access, which previously fed into this part of the site. As part of the proposals, that is proposed to be brought back into use. So that would require the demolition of these two buildings that are in here. This sort of canopy is already gone, and that would provide a link through into that part of the site. So in addition to those two buildings and the sort of main sort of dwelling itself, if you like, there's also this building in here, which is to the southern side of the annex property, which is also to be demolished as part of the application. Some site photos, just to provide a bit more context. So that's the dwelling that's to be replaced, which you can see in the top left-hand corner of the screen. So it's a single-storey building of red brick construction with a pitched roof and gable ends. You can see the sort of courtyard as you enter the property in here from the private drive, and that's the courtyard area to the front. To the bottom left, you've got kind of a end-on view of that dwelling looking sort of westwards. And that's the outbuilding adjacent to it, which would also be demolished. And in the bottom right, that's just for context, that's the main dwelling at Hatscop's Farm, and that just shows the relationship between that and the existing dwelling to be demolished as part of the proposals. So there's further photos. This is the sort of access drive, which I mentioned in the previous slides, which is proposed to be brought back into use and will provide access to the property. So you'd come up the driveway, turn left into here, and then you've got sort of the white building you can see there, which would be demolished to allow access through. That's a closer up view of that building that you can see in the top right hand corner. That's the other side of that building from inside the courtyard, which is in the bottom right of the screen, and that's one of the other outbuildings which is to be demolished as part of the proposals. So as you can see, mixed kind of condition, the existing buildings that are there and of sort of varying form and age and design. They're currently used for a mixture of storage and garaging for the applicant, ancillary to the use of Hatscop's Farm. So turning to the proposed developments, this is the proposed site layout. As I said, you've got the access drive sort of feeding in, and you can see the access way that would be cleared in here. The buildings that are to be demolished are shown by the red sort of dashed lines. So you've got the two structures that are close to each other there. The existing lawful dwelling, which is in here, and then the outbuilding that was adjacent to it. So the proposals are to replace those buildings with a 2-bedroom bungalow, which is the property just in here, as well as a triple garage with a sort of adjoining storage area. So the triple garage and store is to be used incidental to the main house at Hatscop's Farm and will replace the function of these sort of older outbuildings, which are going to be removed as part of the proposals. And then the dwelling is a replacement for the 2-bed property that we demolished just in here. So as you can see, the sort of built form does extend slightly further to the south in the site than the existing sort of built form, but it's broadly comparable in terms of its location within the site. and the level of floor space that's proposed overall, again, is comparable to the existing. It's sort of within 10 square metres in total of the floor space that's going to be lost. In addition to the buildings themselves, there's also an area of amenity space that will be proposed for the dwelling to provide some outdoor sort of amenity for its occupiers. Again, this is sort of to the sort of southern side of the Eastern properties, but it is within the boundary and the confines of the area within sort of Hatscop's Farms ownership and curtilage. So as I said, some buildings to be demolished as part of the proposals. This is the existing dwelling, to reiterate, that has got a lawful use, which has been established as an independent property. As I said, single-storey pitched roof. You can't quite see it on here because we've got the sort of full floor plan, but it is a two-bedroom property that's in there. And these are the other outbuildings. So again, mix of single-storey pitched roof buildings used for storage and garaging, and they'll also be demolished as part of the application. Turning to proposed buildings, these are the elevations of the dwelling and adjoining garage. So it follows a similar form, scale and design to what's to be removed. So single-storey, pitch roof, gable-ended, similar to the existing buildings sort of elsewhere on the site as well that would be removed. And then we've got, so this would be the sort of elevation from the courtyard just in here, and that's the sort of entrance to the triple garage in there, and the sort of small storage area that would adjoin it and link to the main dwelling. Floor plans of those, of the building. So you've got the triple garage, which is just in here, and that's sort of adjoining sort of stores. There's a bit of a link between the two in terms of the physical adjoinment of the structures. This is the bungalow itself, so it's got an integral garage, 2 bedrooms, and then a sort of central living, kitchen, dining space, which would open out onto the amenity area to the rear and the side, which is proposed. So they're the plans, so in terms of what's supposed to be demolished and what's supposed to be constructed. There is one update to the report. So the report sets out that it was identified that there was an ecological appraisal and some B&G information that was required to be submitted. That's now been received. There's a summary there of the findings of that on the screen. So it found no evidence of bats, but recommended a pre-commencement inspection of the building's proportionate measure before they're demolished. There was some evidence of bird's nest or opportunities for nesting within the existing dwelling and adjacent outbuilding, and there's some recommendations for the timing of demolition and ecological supervision, as well as some other precautionary working methods recommended. In addition, there's proposals for enhancements to achieve biodiversity net gain on the site, so habitat creation, native planting and the installation of bat and bird boxes on the new buildings. So that has recently been received, so it's been sent to our ecologists to be considered, and at this stage the comments of our ecologists are awaited on those findings and the report itself. So turning to a summary and conclusion and the key points associated with the application. So the principle of development is considered to be acceptable. So the replacement of a lawful dwelling in the countryside is allowed for by local plan policy, so S5, which covers development in the countryside, and DM26, which covers the replacement of existing lawful buildings in the countryside subject to certain criteria. In terms of the buildings themselves, they're proportionate in scale and complementary in design to the existing development and structures that's on the site. They'd respect the character of the area and not have an unduly urbanising impact. You saw the sort of condition of some of the buildings, so it also would serve to kind of improve the appearance and tidy up that part of the site in addition. And as I said earlier, the overall level of floor space that's proposed is broadly comparable to the existing buildings that would be lost, so within 10 square metres of what's being demolished. There's also appropriate level of amenity for the future residents of the new property, and there'd be no adverse impact on the amenity of the occupiers of neighbouring properties. There's no objection from the Highway Authority, suitable means of access with appropriate visibility, and levels of car parking, cycle storage and bin storage are able to be provided on the site. There's no objection with the Council's tree officer. There'll be no adverse impacts on the trees, which are to the south of the site, subject to conditions to ensure protection of those trees during the construction of the development. So subject to the comments of the Council's ecologist on the updated information that's been received, the proposals are considered to accord with local and national planning policy and are considered to constitute sustainable development. So there is a slightly revised recommendation which takes account of we've now received the ecological information. So the updated recommendation is subject to the receipt and consideration of the comments of the Council's ecologist in relation to that survey and biodiversity net gain information, and any additional conditions which are identified as being necessary in relation to this, to delegate the application back to the planning manager in conjunction with the chair and vice chair of the committee to permit, subject to conditions set out in the agenda. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, David, for your report. We do have a gentleman who's registered to speak this evening on this planning application, Mr. Brinton King, who I believe is the applicant. Mr. King, you will have 3 minutes.
Lovely, thanks. So David did a great job there actually of giving the overview, so only a few other things I'd like to point out. The property also has permission for a C1 two-storey property in place of the existing annex, and I don't think that the appearance of that on the site works as well as the new application, so that's why I've worked with David to make it cover both of those locations so that it kind of builds over the top of the existing planning. The picture you saw of the driveway being renewed, that was for the guy who owned the barn, had steam engines, and you might have noticed there were big doors on the end of the barn, so that was so you could drive straight down. Don't know if you can see it in that picture, but there's doors on that end of the barn, so that's what it was used for. The shelter that we had there was for turkeys that were in the barn, so that was a temporary structure. They were a lot of work, so we haven't got them anymore. But my wife and I have lived here for 13 years, really enjoy the site. We've been renewing it from the beginning, got rid of multiple mobile homes and bad buildings. The buildings that are left there, we can't renovate them anymore. They just get damp, falling apart, and therefore that's why we're really looking to do a sensible and cost-effective in the long-term rebuild of both those buildings, but also the house. And that's why you've probably seen a few applications from Hatscop's Farm, and I'm trying to get it, all the mess and everything all done at the same time, and that's why I've been working with David to try and make sure that it's something that's acceptable for the site. Hopefully it will improve the appearance overall. I'm certain it will from where I am located. There actually isn't anybody that can see it, but if they could, it would look better. And I certainly want it to look better at the site, and hope to live there for a very long time. So thanks for your consideration, and look forward to your decision. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. King, and thank you for coming along to address the committee this evening. Thank you very much. Right, okay, so I'm now going to open it up to councillors' questions. Councillors have questions only at this time, please. Thank you. Any questions? Yes, Councillor Kyrle.
Yeah, just a quick one. Can I ask what the actual purpose of having a separate access to the site is if the site is not going to be split? And one of the concerns potentially is about whether this site will be split in effect, given the independence, if you like, of the proposed dwelling, and given the access. I mean, I know it quite well myself. The access route itself, why there is a need to have a separate access if you can gain. Sorry, I'm using access a lot. If you can actually gain access to the dwelling through the courtyard, if you like, why would you then need to? Because I think in the report it says it's for family members or something anyway, so I can't understand why you'd need to have a separate access to the dwelling if there wasn't a proposal potentially to split the site.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Kyrle. David, do you have a response to that? Thank you.
I mean, in terms of the sort of the desire for the separate access, obviously that's what the applicant has put before us. We will consider sort of planning merits of that. As the applicant kind of explained, it was an access route that was previously utilised, albeit for a different purpose. And it does, you are correct, it does give sort of potentially a greater level of subdivision to the site, because it allows kind of an independent access to come into that part of the site compared to the existing route. But in terms of whether that's harmful in planning terms, we don't consider that it is really in terms of causing harm. It's a route that's there that could be brought back into use. Otherwise, it does provide access into that part of the site, but the site's well contained. It's only going to be a limited amount of movements that are going to travel down there. And as I say, it's part of the overall tidying up of the site to remove the buildings that at the moment inhibit that access. So I think kind of in summary, as I say, there's a desire to provide that, to bring that route back into use, which is part of the application. in planning terms, we don't think that's harmful to do that. As you said, it does give a greater impression potentially of subdivision of the site, but ultimately is a replacement for an existing lawful independent dwelling on the site. So to have a separate access is in itself not entirely sort of unreasonable, would be our view in that respect.
So you can see where I was going with that then, because I think that does lend itself to an application for division of the site in the future. And albeit I appreciate the triple garage is associated with the main dwelling house, I appreciate that, obviously that sort of link, if you know what I mean. But it does lend itself, and I know that has been a concern over the years, and I'm notwithstanding obviously the gentleman who's only lived there for 13 years, but previous to that, because we have seen an erosion, if I may use that word, of its use as a farm through obviously agricultural workers dwelling, which is one of the dwelling that's there. I know that may have been a house, a dwelling house, but prior to that it was agricultural workers accommodation, if you know what I mean. And then we then saw that agricultural tie removed, and then obviously then what you mentioned about the certificate and all that thing. So I know that local residents have been concerned about the potential of development on this site and the potential for it to be hived or split, if you know what I mean, or over intensification, if you like, of the site. And given the sensitivity of the nature of the site and the gap, that was obviously their principal concerns, and that's why I say so. In the application, does it say what that access way will be made up with? At the moment, it looks like mud, to be honest.
Yeah, it potentially would need to be resurfaced.
Is that conditioned in the...
We can just get up to this. Sorry, bear with me. So the report. There is a condition which covers, I think, surfacing the amenity area and landscaping of the amenity area. So we could extend that. Bear with me a second. I'll find the relevant condition, which is condition 3. Which no development slab levels, so it covers materials, cycle bin storage, landscaping scheme to cover all surfacing, trees and planting for the amenity area. So we could extend that condition by way of a sort of minor tweak to it to also cover the access route into the site. Members thought that was reasonable. So that's point D of condition 3.
I mean, obviously, I see where other members want to go with that, but I would like to see that, just to make sure that we did have that, but within that, that we'd obviously... There'd need to obviously be drainage looked at and all that kind of stuff that would go with that, suds or whatever, etc., to make sure that we weren't creating a impermeable surface that would then cause flooding potentially to any of the other dwellings that are, well, the gardens, if you know what I mean, they're close by to that.
Just picking up on a point you mentioned earlier, Councillor, just in terms of the intensification of use on the site and the sort of previous applications, and the applicant mentioned that as well. Just for context, I'll just flick through. And we have had recently a previous sort of scheme on this site, which you'll see here, which was sort of refused and is mentioned in the report. So just to give you a bit more kind of context on that. So that had sought to keep the existing building and the existing buildings in there, but to kind of include an additional dwelling further to the south, which we felt expanded that built form further on from the confinement of where those buildings are, and also intensified the use on there. So as the applicant sort of said, that application was refused, and there has been a genuine effort to try and kind of confine it and keep it constrained to where that existing built form is, to prevent that sort of what we'd refer to as the undue urbanisation of the sites and the countryside and the gap, and that's kind of resulted in the revised scheme we've got now, which, as I say, sort of confines that built form to broadly where it is currently, and also ensures there's no significant material increase in the level of floor space on the site relative to what's there at the moment.
Thank you very much. Councillor Asman.
Thank you, Chair. Could you please tell me whether it would be possible to condition the application, if it was granted, for the permission to be conditioned that the dwelling should be used as private dwelling house only, and that it should not at any time be used for temporary accommodation, or thinking specifically about holiday let accommodation and Airbnb.
What's been applied for is a residential dwelling, so that would be a C3 C3 use. If it was to be used as holiday accommodation, that would be within the C1 use class. That would require a change of use application in itself, and because that requires planning permission, it wouldn't be necessary to condition it specifically, because what has been applied for is a replacement dwelling in effect. So as I say, if it was used in any other form, and that would be a breach of that planning, it would require consent in its own right.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Kinloch.
And just about the floor space or the area, is that the floor space of the single-storey building that's where the garages are, or is that the single-storey plus the couple of garages and things then combined together?
It's the total floor space. So the total floor space of what's proposed in terms of the dwelling itself and the triple garage and the sort of store area, and that's compared to all of the buildings that would be lost. So in terms of the amount of floor space currently in these 4 buildings compared to what's proposed, it's about 10 square metres larger in terms of what's proposed compared to the existing. The dwelling itself, I think I covered in the form, just trying to find the relevant bits, is moderately larger. So the existing dwelling's got 125.8 square metres of internal floor space, and the proposed is 149.6. So it'll be slightly larger, it's about 20 square metres larger, just over. But overall, in terms of the level of built form on the site, it's broadly comparable, I say, within 10 square metres of what's proposed. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so it's 20-something metres bigger than the single building, but then when you take everything in consideration, it's then 10 bigger.
Yes, yeah. So the dwelling is about 20, just over 20 square metres larger than the existing dwelling, but the total amount of built form on the site is about 10 square metres different between the two.
Thank you very much. Are there any other further questions before we move into debate, councillors? No? Okay then. So does any councillor wish to start the debate, please, on this application? No? If there's no debate then, I'm going to put the recommendation then to oh, sorry, Councillor Kyrle, you wish to say something?
Yeah, no, I was just gathering my thoughts, and there was a question, unfortunately, about the access point again, because obviously the photographs at the moment clearly, obviously, show quite a stark, harsh sort of wall, if you know what I mean. Obviously, where it's got the barn, well, not barns, the whatever that wall is, or fence, sorry, and then you then got the white. So, is there any sort of is that going to sort of be, once they get demolished or whatever, are they going to be sort of landscaped or whatever? I mean, what's the plan of when that gets opened up? You know, all that stuff is knocked down or whatever. I mean, what's the proximity in effect to that? Where's the edge of the building, the new proposed building, in relation to the access point? And if there is gap, if you know what I mean, is it going to be sort of landscaped at all and made look nicer or whatever? Because at the moment, obviously, it clearly doesn't look what it's going to look like in the end.
So this fencing in here, which is on the side, that's the sort of the rear garden of the residential properties to the side. This building here will stay. So that block is staying, so that's not proposed to be demolished. It's this building in here, the white building, which you can see sort of closer up there, that will be demolished. So this will be surfaced and will allow the sort of access to sort of jut between those two structures, which are to be retained as part of the proposal. So say we can cover the surfacing of this to make sure it's appropriate. So there's probably limited scope for any sort of additional landscaping down there to maintain sufficient width, but the buildings themselves will stay.
I thought that was going. Sorry.
Okay.
Apologies, sorry.
Okay, thank you. Would you like to turn your microphone off, Councillor Kyrle? Thank you. Thank you very much. Right, okay then. So no further questions and no debate. In that case then, the recommendation before you, councillors, is to delegate back to the planning manager in conjunction with the chair and vice chair of the local area committee to permit, subject to the following conditions. And I would also like to add in Councillor Kyrle's condition, please, to extend the condition to include, to surface the access route. Is that right? That's what you suggested, Councillor?
Yeah, and as long as that includes, obviously, the drainage side of it as well, whether that just comes with it or if it just can be added in or whatever.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kyrle. Right. Could I have a proposer for the recommendation, please, then, to permit Cllr Corben? Thank you. Seconder? Cllr Gomer. Thank you. All those in favour, please show. Aye. I think that's unanimous then. Thank you very much. Next, planning applications, item 8, which is for 24 Kingsman Drive. And can I ask Councillor Kinloch just to sit down in the auditorium, please? Thank you. You can just sit there and watch us. Thank you. Right, I'm going to ask our planning officer, Alexandra Stone, to present the report. Alexandra, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. This application is a retrospective application for a summer house and pergola at 24 Kingsman Drive in Botley. The location plan is shown on the left and aerial view on the site on the right. You can see the house has a garage and a driveway which faces towards Kingsman Drive. These photos show the application site. In the first photograph, you can see the front of the garage and the neighbouring garage of number 22 Kingsman Drive, with the second photo showing the alleyway between the properties with the top of the summer house visible above the fence. The third photograph shows the pergola towards the boundary of 26 Kingsman Drive. These photos show the summer house and the view from the platform towards the neighbouring property of 22 Kingsman Drive. As you can see, the view towards the neighbouring property would be restricted by their wooden pergola and the neighbouring fence and would not look directly into the property. As you can see, the site layout plan shows the position of the summer house and the pergola within the rear garden. Here you can see the pergola. With the roof shutters open, it would be approximately 7 centimetres taller. This slide shows the summer house elevations and floor plan. As you can see, the photos of the summer house sit on a platform to the rear side of the site towards the boundary of 22 Kingsman. In conclusion, the proposed development would be in keeping with the character and pattern of development within the locality and would not have an unacceptable impact on the amenity of the neighbouring residents. Therefore, my recommendation would be to permit the application subject to the conditions set out in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Alexandra, and everyone can see this is a retrospective planning application because, as you can see from the photographs, everything is in place. Right, so we don't have any speakers on this application, so we'll open up councillors for questions. Yes, Councillor Kyrle.
Just a quick one, obviously notwithstanding the fact that the council lives in close proximity to this, but I presume the reason why we've had this come to us is because what's the reason why it's come to us? Is it because they've had to put an application in because it's too big or something, or it goes above the fence line or something, or someone's objected? I don't know.
There was an objection next door, so the applicant decided to put in an application anyway. So it's his decision.
Oh, so they're sort of covering their bases rather than the fact that they needed to necessarily put one in because it wasn't covered under sort of temporary buildings, permitted developments or something like that.
Yeah, it does require permission because the platform's slightly above permit development.
I did actually wonder, from the photographs, you could see that the platform does seem to be quite big from what I could see anyway. It does seem as though it's quite sort of big. I don't know, but yeah, that's because it obviously looks like it's quite above the fence line, or seems to be from that angle anyway. May not be, but it looks like it is.
Thank you. I think for transparency reasons, because Councillor Kinloch is a neighbour as well, it has to come to the committee. Yeah. No, I understand what you're saying. Yeah. Okay. Right. Any more questions on this application, please? No? Okay then. Right. Oh, sorry, Councillor Corben.
Sorry, I just thought of a question. Alexandra, you've just said that it's the platform is slightly above what would be needed for, or what would be allowed under permitted development. How much are we talking about? What would have been an acceptable level of elevation for the platform?
So permitted development would be 30 centimetres. I'm not too sure how much more, but I don't think it's much bigger. I think maybe 5 centimetres.
Okay, so we don't know what the actual measurement of this elevation is. So but it's a small. May well be in the plan. Sorry.
Just going to measure it, just provide some clarification. So just in terms of that and the height, so the height is measured in terms of permitted development at the highest part of the ground. So whilst it looks sort of higher probably here, in terms of where you take that measurement from, it would be the sort of the part up here, which is kind of lesser in height. So that's what the legislation sort of prescribes. So whilst it does look taller, it's in terms of that difference, if you like, between the two, it's probably less sort of marked. So Alex just measured it, and it's about just under 40 centimetres, the height of that platform. So you're talking sort of less than 10 centimetres is the difference at the highest point of the ground.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I just thought of a question. Is the reason they put it on such a high platform is because the garden isn't level? Does it slope, or is there any particular reason they've put it on there like that? Thank you.
Originally it was sloped, so they've landscaped. So now they haven't got any photos prior to landscaping, but he said that was the highest part. But yeah, there's no proof of that.
Thank you very much. Right, yes, Councillor Kyrle.
So I don't really want to make a meal of this, but obviously looking at the front of the summer house to the next door neighbour, I know it's not sort of over. It does seem a bit awkward to me, to be honest with you. You could orientate it a different way and look at your own garden rather than looking at somebody else's back of their house. I mean, it is does look a little bit awkward to me. And the fact that, as we've just talked about, 40 centimetres or whatever, without wanting to completely labour the point, if they'd lowered it slightly, you wouldn't have had any of that issue over the fence potentially. So it does look a bit awkward in my perspective. I mean, they're staring at the back of their house, but clearly because of the way the fence line runs down because of the topography of the gardens, it does sort of lend itself in a way to overlooking, in my view, if you wanted to spend that time standing in your summer house looking at somebody else's back garden, I don't know. But it does just seem a little bit awkward, really. I don't think it's very, in my personal perspective, it doesn't seem to be very well thought out. And with regards to the size of I don't quite know what the square footage of that, it doesn't look very big, obviously, but are there any issues with it? Does it have its own drainage or anything? Does it need to have it? Because I don't think the gardens are particularly large.
I believe, and I haven't visited the site myself, but I believe you can just about see it in there. You've got sort of I think, is that a sort of French drain, sort of Lacquer drain along there to provide drainage to drain the site. I mean, I think taking what you're saying, Councillor Kyrle, in terms of it is elevated above that fence, so it does sort of project up a little bit, and as you said, the levels have been altered through raising it through a platform rather than sort of lowering it, which might be an alternative option. But we are where we are in terms of what's proposed and that relationship, and it's whether it's sort of appropriate or not in amenity terms. And Alex has included a sort of photo here, which is kind of taken from standing on this platform just here at the front, to sort of look down into the neighbouring garden, and you could just about see on there, that's the sort of shared alleyway, if you like, between the two, which kind of blocks views to a degree sort of down and into the neighbouring garden. So whilst it's probably not ideal, and it could have been done in a slightly different manner, so taking account of the modest difference between what they could do otherwise anyway, and permitted development and what's now proposed, it's probably not harmful enough to refuse it on those grounds. But yeah, I appreciate the sort of in terms of what you're saying from that perspective.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, if there are no other questions then, we'll move into debate. Does any councillor wish to start the debate? No? All I'd like to say is just the fact that more and more residents are putting these pods or something in their back garden since COVID to have space for where a lot of them work from home. So whether some of them you just see get automatic planning permission, or some of them don't actually get planning permission. I think it's a bit ambiguous sometimes as to what requires planning permission and what doesn't with these in rear gardens. Okay, then, right. The recommendation before you, councillors, is to permit. So, do I have a proposer for the motion, please, to permit? Councillor Pretty? Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Gomer? Could I have a show of hands for all those in favour, please? I think that's unanimous then. Thank you very much. Thank you, Alexander. Right, councillors, we will now move on to agenda item number 9, which is the planning application for the removal of an oak tree at 11 Ferndale. And I'm going to ask Chris Stringer to present the report. Chris, thank you.
Good evening, councillors. Yep, let me just get this up. That's right. Okay. So this is the application. Can you hear me right? At 11 Ferndale, Hedge End. The proposal, as set out in the application, is to fell one number English oak, T2. The reasons for the proposed work are because the tree roots have been implicated in subsidence of the property, as set out in the numerous reports within the application. So a bit of context, this is the location plan, and the green hatched area along the bridleway to the rear of the properties is the TPO area that covers the tree in question. And this is the site with T2 being shown to the rear of the subject property. Other trees in there as well as the small spruce T1 and then another oak T3, which is shown on the other far side of the bridleway. The T2 is approximately 13 metres from the rear of the property. This photograph is taken looking west. The application property is shown on the right-hand side of the picture, and you can just see the dark T1. This is the spruce that's planted, the small spruce is also shown in there. There's a dead oak that's not shown on the plan previously. That's also present. And this is a photograph from within the application property showing T2 in the far corner, the dead oak, and then T3. It's hard to make out. There's another small conifer in front of it, but it's behind there. So onto the discussion. Yeah, T3 is located T2, is located to the rear garden. It's early mature specimen. It appears out really in good condition, and it offers good public amenity, as you can see from the images. It's visible from the public realm. The proposal to remove the tree would therefore impact that amenity. Tree roots have been implicated in the subsidence of the property. Level monitoring carried out on behalf of the insurance company confirmed seasonal movement and extracted soil samples from 1.8 metres deep, found tree roots identified as probably quercus, so that's oak. So after careful consideration, the officer considered that the submitted evidence demonstrated that T2 was a material cause of the harm to the property, and concluded that it was justified. Another aspect of our assessment, we have to, in line with the PBG, we have to assess whether there will be any financial compensation payable from us to the applicant if we refused it. So that has to be considered, and that's set out in the report as well. Part of that was to establish other options, and the engineering solutions that have been considered and ruled out were things like root barriers and pruning the tree. And then we've got the bottom here. The insurers have estimated the cost of remedial work will be about £8,000 as set out in the report, and the cost associated with retaining the tree would be about £80,000. And as I said, the last sentence there, I already touched on that, but the the report considered no other workable solutions, and the officer concurred with that. So the recommendation tonight is set out on the agenda to consent to the removal of one English oak to ground level. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris, for your report. Right, okay. So I'm now going to open up to councillors for questions. I know, Chris, you've had a few emails from councillors, haven't you, with the questions, and you've been answering them. Anybody else got any further questions this evening that they would like to raise regarding this application, please? Yes, Councillor Corben.
Thank you. I'd like to thank Chris as well. Thank you for answering my email this morning. Thank you. I have a question. How many other oak trees, Chris, are there in that immediate area, say within 200 metres of this oak? Or 100 metres, it doesn't really matter. There are a lot.
Yeah, there's probably some. I haven't visited the site. I wasn't the officer that carried out this assessment. I'm just presenting it to you, so I don't know. Is my answer. But obviously, knowing the area, there is quite a few, as across the borough. Really, it's a very common large tree.
And yes, quite. Thankfully, and those trees that are there, some of those are closer to houses than this one. This is 10 metres. Did you say 13 metres?
Yeah, 13
away. And other trees are there. Are we being asked to set a precedent here in terms of if one were to make a borehole anywhere in that area, are there not? If somebody wanted to make it look as if a tree was causing problems, would it be fairly straightforward to do it as a layman? And I absolutely accept it. And none of it. And I appreciate you haven't written the report. You're a professional tree man, and I'm a professional looker at trees. Nothing more than that, Chris. So, but in terms of the amenity. And I have been there, actually, unlike you, actually. So I did go and have a look. And it's a magnificent tree. Those pictures don't do it justice. Absolutely don't do it justice. Are we setting a precedent here? So as soon as this goes, someone else could say, oh, actually, we don't want the one in our front garden or over there on Hampshire land, something. Are we setting a precedent? That was my...
Yeah. No, not at all. We have numerous cases, subsidence cases. We live in an area predominantly of shrinkable clay soils. We refuse, I couldn't give you the numbers, but we refuse a lot. Mm-hmm. The ones we do allow and we do consent to, they've had to prove to a certain threshold that the tree roots are not only implicated as damage, and that's all set out from government guidance. So we follow the government guidance and only consent when we're absolutely sure that it's the case. So.
And one final question, if I may. The roots, and I absolutely take your point. This is one borehole. I obviously get that there are going to be more roots, but the ones that the borehole have identified are 2 millimetres in diameter. The ones that are alive, there are some, or carrying starch or doing something with starch, if I've understood the application correctly. So the one that's alive, there were 3 in the borehole of 2 millimetres. That doesn't sound very, very big to me. I appreciate if there's hundreds of the blessed things, then that would clearly have an effect. Have we got any further proof that the subsidence in the property is actually being caused by the tree? And could it not just be a house on the end of a terrace, which is built in the wrong place, given allegedly some previous issues with subsidence where the tree wasn't affected quite recently, six years ago?
Yeah, so a couple of points. Firstly, in terms of the root size, you've got to, most of the water abstraction would come from the very fine roots. So we're talking 2 millimetres, 1 millimetre, that sort of thing. As roots get larger, they become lignified, they become woody, and they can't absorb water. So it's totally what we'd expect to see is very, very small stuff. And during the process of digging a borehole, obviously a lot of that gets destroyed. It's very easy to destroy fine root hairs and stuff. So that was sort of the first point to cover, that, while we only got a few samples of roots, that's indicative of probably what's in there. There's obviously going to be a lot more, and that is absolutely the stuff that would abstract water from the soil. The second point was the, well, as going on to the sort of element, is there anything else it could potentially be? I mean, you know, I'm not a structural engineer. We have to look at the reports put to us, and according to the insurance company structural engineers, you know, and in conjunction with the arboriculturists on site, who are specialist subsidence consultants, they've concluded it's seasonal movement, which is indicative of you know, a deciduous tree taking water in the summer and not requiring as much in the winter. So we would have to take that on face value. You know, there's a certain level of professional integrity involved with that, and though, as I said, we do refuse where we're not convinced, but in this case, the officer was convinced by the evidence that was put to them.
Thank you. Councillor Kyrle.
Thank you, and also thank you, Chris. I did send you a list of questions. I know there were quite a few, so I apologise about that, but obviously I'm quite passionate about these sorts of things, as indeed I know you are. You love trees as well. A couple of things. In one of the technical reports, it did mention about the fact that the subsidence was in their table was only deemed as being slight. So I am concerned about the threshold that needs to be reached, and clearly, obviously, there's a, as you say, guidance or table that's set out that says once you reach a threshold, whatever, etc., then that's it, fait accompli. But we're being asked to make a decision on an application, or you have been, we've referred it obviously here, and it is concerning about that sort of level of that they need, that the threshold that needs to be reached to just basically say, well, it's the tree, therefore, you know, rather than an insurance company saying, well, yes, it's going to be expensive, whatever we do. Actually, we could put in measures like, I mean, I know they talk about a membrane for a tree, but I mean, I don't understand why they can't dig a trench and fill it full of concrete. That would probably stop roots, I would suggest. And the cost as well, the fact that if you don't do something, it will be 80 grand. Well, I mean, I'm not a, somebody else might be able to help me out, but I would have thought you could probably build a house for that amount of money. So the fact that they're saying it would cost that amount of money, when in their own table they're saying that it's own the crack or the millimetres or whatever the damage appears at this present time to only be slight. You know, if it had been severe, then clearly, obviously, you know, I presume the house is in danger of falling down. I mean, I don't know, but on the scale of the millimetres of damage that apparently this tree is causing at the moment, it is only slight. So it does seem as though it's a bit of a, you know, quite a thing to say we're going to take down a 100-year-old oak or whatever, etc., because of slight damage to a property that actually, yes, there's roots, and I take the point that Councillor Corben said that, my personal opinion, I could be wrong, that you could probably stick a spade in the ground and come up with tree roots wherever you stick and certainly around Havendale and Ferndale, which has got quite a considerable amount of mature trees, so I fear for their safety or future. So I don't know whether you've got anything you can say about, and clearly, obviously, you've had to come to, you know, it's threshold reached, therefore there's not much else we can do. My concern is this is being written by someone who has said tree is at fault, threshold reached, however low or high that might be on a scale, fait accompli, so tree goes.
Yeah, I think the first point to make is that, you know, it's not just a case of the tree roots being present. There's got to be damage first and foremost, which has been proven in the reports. So, you know, we talk about a lot of tree roots being located in that area, and, you know, in that sort of, but not all implicated in subsidence. So, and, you know, generally the amount of trees that are close to buildings that aren't implicated in subsidence is a lot greater than the ones that are. It just so happens this one is. Going back to the second point you made, which was about the damage being slight at the moment. I mean, no, you're absolutely right, but at some point the damage started, and I think it was 2022. We're now 2 years into that. You know, this is not a problem that's going to stop necessarily. With seasonal movement continuing, I assume, and I'm not a structural engineer as I mentioned earlier, or insurance specialist, but I assume that the insurance company look at their liability on that property, and they don't wish to allow it to get worse, because it will continue to move, and each time each seasonal movement happens, you know, the building becomes more and more damaged with that. So what we're looking now is a snapshot, I guess. So 2 years in from the first damage, and, you know, none of us, I suppose, can work out where it's going to go. Well, we can't in this room, whether an engineer could, but where it's going to go in 2 more years, 4 more years if we left it. So that's why we from our perspective, we don't tend to weigh up the damage to the property, because that's not our remit. We're here to assess whether if the tree roots have been implicated in that damage, which we've already done.
I appreciate that. And in some of my questions, I'm sure you've probably looked at it and think, oh, hang on a minute, this is not what I'm the tree consultant. I'm not, so you're looking at what's being presented to you. So please don't get me wrong about me asking sort of questions about, but I just, without wanting to, because there was an issue a few years ago, because this site is quite well on and off known to me, that there was an issue of boundary creep where the back fence was moved. Now, I actually went through my emails this morning, I did raise it in 2017 with our enforcement team, saying that they'd moved their boundary. That oak tree was actually in the bridle route, not in their back garden. And a previous owner, not this one I suggest, enclosed that oak tree in their property. So when we're talking about, you say that we would potentially have to give compensation, if it were in the bridle route, it would be Hampshire County Council's tree, and not ours, or not that residents. Would that still apply then, that we would, is it because we're the deciding authority on TPOs rather than where the tree actually is and whose land it's on, if you know what I mean?
Yeah, the legal liability is quite an interesting one, but from what we're assessing is there's a certain part of the legislation that the determining authority can be held liable in terms of compensation for adverse decisions. Yeah, so that's what we're referring to in here. It's up to a year following the decision, but that's what we're referring to, yeah.
And so how long did we say that they've been monitoring the movement of, because they say that the soil has been moving about. Well, I mean, soil moves around all over the time, but it doesn't necessarily mean that so how long have they been monitoring this slight damage to this property? Because that, again, the point they're presenting to us now is that it is only slight. So therefore, how have they seen that get worse over how long? Because my worry is if it's only slight now and they've monitored it for 2 years, then clearly is that enough of a threshold to get rid of a 100-year-old oak? And I'm sorry I'm labouring this point, but I worry about this smoking gun scenario of a house that's being built on clay. I think it's alluded to in one of the technical reports about the fact that the foundations might not be deep enough anyway. Now, obviously, again, you're not a structural engineer, neither am I, but what I don't want to do is just write off a tree and then find out, actually, oh dear, it was actually something else completely. There's an underground stream that runs underneath that. There is a stream that runs very close to it, or there could be something underneath the property that's not been identified yet, and then subsequently is that we wrote off a 100-year-old oak because we were told by the insurance company that it had to be the tree because it's in the back of the garden, therefore it must be.
Yeah, well, they carried out level monitoring of the cracks, and that was over, I think, an 18-month period. So they went from winter to summer to winter again, and from that was enough to identify seasonal movement. I think if there'd been other forms of subsidence through maybe I don't know, one of your examples, I can't remember what they were now, but yeah, I think you wouldn't be seeing that seasonal movement. That's the key element in these subsidence cases. We do see cases where there is movement in properties, but they haven't proved it's that cyclical nature where it goes up and down, which is what we tend to look for in subsidence cases. Well, actually, was there any other point, Councillor Carr? I can't remember. Sorry. Was that? No. Trying to. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Rupert. Any other questions? Right. Oh, another one, Councillor Kyrle?
Yeah, that's another one, yeah.
Just one more.
So in the report it says that we're not asking or requiring any mitigation against the loss of this oak tree. Now, clearly I understand that we wouldn't want to be planting another oak tree on the site of the oak tree that we've just removed for exactly the same reason. But I don't understand, and maybe it's planning law, and if it is, then in my personal opinion, planning law is wrong in this respect, is because the whole point of high value amenity trees and all this kind of stuff is we really do need to be protecting these, and that's the reason why it's got a TPO on it. It was a big tree when it was TPO'd, I would suggest, or certainly in that way. I'm just wondering why we're not requiring or at least trying to get some kind of off-site mitigation for the loss of a 100-year-old oak tree?
Well, the reason for that simply is we would lose all enforcement powers, so we couldn't make them do it. Simple as that. I mean, there's no legal mechanism that we could employ to, tree ownership is related to land ownership. So as soon as we asked them to plant it somewhere else, the new landowner would be the new tree owner, and therefore we had no enforcement powers over them.
So I think we've been down this sort of route with trees and stuff before, so we couldn't ask that they make a contribution for us to plant trees on their behalf, given we've got our own tree nursery and we've also got land, sang land and everything else where we could quite easily plant 10 or 15 oak trees or something or other species, shall we say, and ask them to make a contribution, given the fact that clearly they're going to have to pay for the tree to come down, or somebody is, whether it's the insurance company or whatever. And I just can't understand why we wouldn't want to be saying, at least alluding or suggesting to the applicant, given that we're going to potentially save your house from falling down, could you not make a contribution of a couple of £100 to plant some trees? And if you'd hope that most people would say, do you know what, actually, yeah, it's a really good idea. I like trees as well. I don't want to lose this tree. I have to, but we'll plant some somewhere else close by.
Yeah, I think from this perspective, as it was previously, the previous LAC we were at, it's just a case it's beyond planning law, so we can't enforce that. We couldn't ask for that. Obviously, they voluntarily wanted to do something, then that's fine, but we can't condition that or hold up an application based on them not wishing to do that.
Could we not do a note to applicant like we did before? Because I think that was the way we moved forward. I don't think there was any suggestions coming from the other side, but I think the way forward we found, albeit I appreciate whether it was a town council or whatever, but whether we could do a note to applicants saying, given the fact that we are tackling climate change, all that kind of stuff, we have a climate change environment emergency, all that kind of thing, we've got a tree nursery, it would be really nice if you maybe wanted to make a gesture or something and buy some trees or something.
Yeah, we've discussed this before, haven't we? I think about that note to applicant. Yeah, I mean, I think in I don't see there's a massive issue with that, but I think the important point of this particular case, which is what we're talking about, is that most of the benefits from those trees come from where they are located in situ. Most of the ecosystem service provision and most of the amenity, for example, is from that exact location. So planting them somewhere else, you're obviously moving that amenity value to somewhere else. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I think we've given this application a good airing. Thank you very much for the questions and the answers. We have said before that if any tree was to be felled, then 2 trees would have to be planted somewhere to replace them. And this is something that we've all agreed on here. And I believe that Councillor Kyrle, as Cabinet Member for the Environment, that was agreed that 2 trees would be planted for every tree that was felled. Yeah. Thank you very much. Right. Okay then. So if there are no more questions then, is there any debate, councillors? Yes, Councillor Kyrle, thank you.
Yes, I've really struggled with this, to be honest with you, and I totally understand the tree consultant and tree officer's point of view, because clearly there is planning law and there's case law about all of this sort of stuff. I am really concerned about building houses too close to large statement trees and then putting TPOs on them and then finding that because the house is too close to a large tree, that the tree has to go. I mean, clearly you're not going to start demolishing houses, but it just is the way it is. We put blanket TPOs on stuff. We've seen it in other areas, even in my ward, or mine and Dave's ward, where trees had development built very close to them. And then when the development was near completion, they then said, oh no, hang on, there's some very big trees in here, they could be an insurance risk if they fell over, we must now remove them, and they reached a threshold where they were going to be removed. Crow's Nest Lane being an example of that. Now I am concerned about the trees in Havendale and Ferndale, given that there are some very substantial oak trees, and clearly there is a danger, although I know every application is looked upon in its own merit, etc., where clearly there will be roots all over the place, frankly, in Havendale and Ferndale. And I think you could quite easily point a gun at any of those trees and have them removed, because the planning law says that you have to, if there's any proof that there's roots anywhere near a property. Well, there will be. I'll absolutely guarantee it. I lived in Havendale for quite a while myself, so I know exactly all about this stuff. So I am really concerned about this, albeit that I think we're sort of painted into a corner, really. I don't want to lose a 100-year-old oak tree, which clearly, by your definition, is a high statement, high amenity tree. It will have taken out all sorts of pollution over the years, etc., cleaned up the air, would be carbon storage, all that kind of stuff, and as soon as that's failed, obviously, we're going to lose that benefit forever. And even if we were to plant more trees to mitigate the loss, the difference between a sapling or even a bigger 10-foot tree to a 100-year-old oak is massive. The gap is huge. In fact, there was quite a large piece on Countryfile about the reasons why we should be protecting large statement trees now, because they are in danger and they are being lost at a huge rate. So I still remain very conflicted about this. I understand the planning merits of it, but I also understand where my heart is on this, and I know some residents who are very keen to see this tree retained, albeit I don't want the council put in a position of having to pay compensation. I am sort of not convinced that it is the only issue with regards to the substance of the property, albeit that I appreciate the threshold has been met. I would prefer to have more work done on it to make sure that it absolutely is the case, but clearly I'm not a tree expert or a structural survey. But the fact that in the table it says it's only slight doesn't to me mean that it's an emergency that tree needs to be removed. So from my perspective, I understand all the arguments and everything else, and it's certainly not a reflection on the officers' work and everything, and I appreciate all of the work they have done on this, but I personally can't support this application. I'm sorry.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kyrle. Is there any other debate, please? Yes, Councillor Asman.
Thank you very much, Chair. I've listened very carefully to Councillor Kyrle, and I fully understand his immense concerns he's got over this, and also to Cllr Corben and the fact that we may be creating precedent. But I think at the end of the day, we as members must have the confidence in our officers to advise us. They are the experts regarding trees. They have considered the reports, and if they are convinced that this tree is causing damage and it is ongoing, then I think we as a council must take their advice in this instance. I would hate to think the council bearing the brunt of a claim for damages. I am quite conflicted, but all in all, I think we should approve this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Asman. Any other councillor? Yes, Councillor Corben.
I wasn't going to say anything else. This does trouble me, I have to say, for the reasons that Rupert's said and the reasons that, from a lay person, it just doesn't feel overwhelming. But this has nothing to do with officers, so please. You're the tree professional. You're not a surveyor, a house surveyor professional, but we get the gist of what's said. And reading the reports, I just don't see it. I just don't see that it's overwhelming enough just to say, bad luck, tree, you're in the wrong place. Those houses over there aren't affected by you. No one else has joined in the application. No one else has joined in the application. We've got a report provided by an insurance company, by their advisors, and this is potentially saving them a lot of money. I don't know where 80 grand comes from, but that seems an awful lot of money to me to mitigate this. And we've got no substantial evidence to say 80,000 is enough. Is it 20 grand? So I don't know. And then we've got a gun to our head to say, you better agree this, or Eastleigh are going to take the hit. So I am completely conflicted, and I don't find the paper convincing for me to support it. And my gut feeling says I can't support it. Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Corben. Any other councillors? Right. Okay then. Right, as much as I mean, we do have some absolutely beautiful oak trees in our area, and they should all be protected. But I'm conflicted on this one as well. Whether to obviously the insurance company, one presumes, please don't quote me on this, is that they're going for the cheapest option, and probably the cheapest option is to fell the tree. But the officers have looked at it and come back with a report. I did see recently an application to fell 3 oak trees because the side of one house was sinking, but that was refused because it said that the report wasn't convincing enough. But as you've said, this seems to be beyond all reasonable doubt that it is the tree that could be, and I say could be, causing the damage. So our trees are absolutely beautiful, and we really appreciate the fact that we have them in our borough. But as I say, as much as it pains me to say this, I am now going to ask for a proposer for the motion, please, to fell the tree subject to standard conditions. Do I have a proposer, please? Cllr Asman. Do I have a seconder? Cllr Gomer. Could I ask for all those in favour, please, on this recommendation? Thank you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right. Any against? 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm going to abstain, I think. Oh, is it split? Okay, so we have a split vote. The only thing that worries me is that compensation would have to be paid by the borough, and I believe I'm right in saying that it will come back on HEWEB. Is that right for compensation? Am I right in saying that? Someone told me the other day it would be. No? No one help me out here? It would be down to HEWEB. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think it was, isn't it? That's what I was told. Right. So, looking at that and trying to weigh it up, I would. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry, can I just quick question? Bearing in mind the sort of financial calculation, we don't actually know where that comes in. Can we not defer this to the next meeting? Because there's not going to be any seasonal change in that, just to confirm whether or not actually it does come back on HEWEB, if it changes anybody's decision.
I think in terms of you to defer the application, it would need to be on a planning grounds. I think the council budget, which budget that may come out of, if there was any compensation payable, is probably not a material planning justification for a deferral. Ultimately, it would be the council's budget, whether it's a HEWEB budget, the local authority budget or capital budget or otherwise. So I think if you were to push for a deferral, I say it needs to be a material planning reason as to why you'd wish to do that.
House.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So the Council's constitution is quite clear. If the area committee votes against the planning officer's recommendation, then the financial consequences of that fall to the area committee. So that's that bit straightforward. My sense of the debate was that actually people want different options explored, and I don't think that's totally off the table at this stage. You yourself said that the insurance company almost certainly have gone for the cheapest answer for them. There may well be other alternatives. I don't think we've explored those, given that there's clearly a pretty strong desire to protect this tree from the area committee. The tree was there first, not the house. And I just wonder whether we've thought laterally about this. I totally get Chris's recommendation from a technical perspective. It's absolutely right recommendation in terms of how the policy is. But we're here as a governance role to try and find out-of-the-box solutions. I'm not sure we've explored those fully yet. So I'd be reluctant to vote yes on this until we're confident we've explored all those options. Look, whether that's deferring or not is another matter. It probably is in some ways, but not for the grounds that have been set forward.
Okay, well, thank you for that, and thank you for all your comments. But I am going to make a decision on this. I don't think we need to refer it. So weighing everything up, and it is such a beautiful tree, I'm going to stick my neck out here and vote with those that have voted against felling the tree. So that is that. Okay. Okay. Oh, okay, so yes, Councillor.
Yeah, that might actually create the solution I was looking for just now, which is that having voted to say, no, we don't want to fell the tree, we now go away and see if there's a different solution to this that can be achieved in a more consensual way, but we'll see.
Well, I think the reason for they need a reason for refusal is the fact that we're not convinced that it is the tree that is causing the damage to the property. I don't know if any other comments you wish to put in, but I think that's the whole thing, that we're not convinced that it is the roots of the tree that are causing the damage to the property. Okay, and that's the reason for refusal. Okay.
I was happy to do so. It sounds like the members aren't convinced that sufficient information has been provided to justify the loss of that tree on the basis of the information that we've got before us. If members are happy to do so, are you happy for that to be the gist of the reason for refusal, with the final wording to be delegated back to the council's planning manager in conjunction with the chair and the vice chair to be confirmed?
Very good, David. Thank you very much. And may I thank you, Chris, too, for answering all the questions that have been put to you as well. I know you've had an enormous amount of questions, and we really appreciate your support. Thank you very much. Right, councillors, let's move on now to item 10, which is the Orchards Way, Gators Mill, Botley Conservation Area appraisals. And I'm going to ask Tim to introduce the report. Tim Dyer. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you, Chair. I don't have I do have a presentation, but I'm not proposing to go through the 3 documents that are in the report. I suppose what I would just point out is that these are draft documents. There are changes potential changes in all 3 of the conservation areas. It's a case of needing to take these to public consultation to examine whether people are in agreement on what those changes are. There are some changes to boundaries which would bring into alignment the actual valuable areas of the conservation areas versus those that we feel no longer meet the kind of criteria. So it's an updating of documents that are over 10 years old, and it's the process by which, as a council, we're renewing the conservation areas, and these are the first 3 to be covered. So the report is simply that. It's a recommendation to be able to take those 3 documents to public consultation and receive feedback from everyone. If there are any questions, though, obviously I'm happy to take them.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Tim, and thank you very much for your very comprehensive reports that you sent out to members to read. Thank you. Are there any questions for Tim on this? Yes, Councillor Kyrle.
It's not really a question. I just wanted to actually echo your comments there. Actually, I very much enjoy reading all of them, actually, to be honest, because you learn quite a huge amount about each of those areas. But obviously, I am quite interested in the Botley stuff. And I was looking at the houses, which obviously there are a significant number of different ages, if you like, going back. And there were a couple of photographs on there, and I thought, hang on a minute, I haven't delivered to that house. And then I realised it was actually Manor Farm, which obviously clearly isn't one that's being lived in. So I thought, hang on, I don't recognise that one. I haven't delivered to that. So yeah, so that's the reason why that is. But no, it's full of amazing amounts of information. It's really, really good. And obviously, I do appreciate that. Obviously, there has been some certain changes, if you like, to the sort of conservation area sort of zones, if you know what I mean. And obviously, that's explained within the document very clearly, which is really good. It's just a shame that we can't, and I know you can't clearly, I don't know if you've got a wand inside your jacket there, that we could do something with the telephone exchange on the high street, which actually looks horrendous in my personal opinion. It would be really nice if they did something with that, like demolish it or something. But that's my personal opinion. But it sort of detracts, I think, from the high street. But other than that, it's a very good document, and I'm sure you'll get some good positive results back from your consultation.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kyrle. Are there any questions for Tim? Yes, Councillor Asman.
Thank you very much indeed. Sorry, I was reading quite carefully the report in respect of Orchards Way, and I see there's a proposal at 4.17 that a group of shrub planting be introduced at the far end of the green to shield the garage compound, etc., etc. Who do we have in mind that will be responsible for the cost of that planting? The landowner or whom?
So I believe we are the landowner as an authority.
Indeed.
So it would be within our gift, but there are a number of recommendations in each of the conservation area appraisals that are negotiated over time. So they're not guaranteed to happen, but there's clearly purpose, and that one is to is to screen the garage block that isn't part of the kind of feel and look of the conservation area. So, but ultimately it would be down to us as an authority to plant and maintain.
Sorry, may I? Just a second question. I'm not clear, I may be very ignorant here, but what are the powers of enforcement? Because the report does say that there have been deviations on the design. Who actually, I mean, is that under planning legislation? So it is under planning legislation that if for example, they change the colour of the doors.
It is enforced under the planning legislation. I would have to talk to our planners to find out what those were. But certainly Orchards Way, there have been a number of cases where things have been changed on the property that maybe haven't met the benchmark of what is has an impact on the conservation area, and the new documentation should tighten some of those up, so putting restrictions on potential things.
Sorry, may I? And in due course, will there be a facility for a copy of the document to be presented to each individual property on the basis that some are tenanted, some are owned? And I think it's important because people will not go out of their way to try and find out whether they may or may not carry out these works. So is there any way of, what's the word I'm seeking, inspecting it, or
so again,
if there have been breaches, how will these become apparent, apart from the fact that there's a physical being, but nobody actually bothers to mention it to the local planning authority? I think that's what I'm trying to say.
So it's a sorry, Chair. It's a fair comment, and what I would say is this: at the moment, the stage where after the recommendation for approval is to take it to public consultation. Yeah. So as part of that process, that the people in those areas will be informed, and there will be hard copies of the document. As with most planning policy documents, there'll be hard copies available in the local libraries and parish offices and Eastleigh Borough Council building, and then an online version as well available for anyone to look at. So that will be for the consultation process. There'll be another round of, if there are changes that need making, to come back and approve a final document. Right. Maybe at that point we can talk about how we need to let local residents know about those particular ones if they haven't already heard about them.
Thank you very much, Councillor Asman, and thank you, Tim. Right, any other questions for Tim on this report? Okay then, right, we will now move into debate. Is there any councillor who wishes to start the debate? Yes, Cllr Corben.
It's not going to be much for debate, sorry, Chair. All I was going to do was echo the comments earlier. I think when people say, what does your council do for you? we collect the bins, and what else do they do? Blah, blah. This is really important. This is really, really good stuff, Tim. And I'd have to say, first-class report. I think easy to read. I think the public consultation will be very interesting to see the responses and how much we get, because that'll be a test of it, won't it? How many, what actually comes back. But I think it's the basis of a really good discussion, a really good document to see what comes next. So first class. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Corben. As you say, it is very, very important, and the work that's gone into this by yourself and maybe your other team members as well is much appreciated. Thank you. Right. Okay. So then, if there is no further debate, then I'm going to ask for a proposer for the recommendations as set out in agenda item 10. Could I have a proposer, please? Yes, Councillor Tennent, seconded Councillor Kinloch. All those in favour of the recommendations, please show. Right, I think that's carried unanimously then. Thank you very much. Right, let's move now on then to item 11, which is the financial management report, and Ross is going to present that report to us. Thank you, Ross.
Thank you, Chair. Just 7 recommendations in my report tonight. I'll just run through those highlighted quickly. It's to note the allocation of £1,361 from the revenue budget to erect a fence at Botley Park allotments adjacent to Orchard Close. Secondly, to approve the proposed fees and charges as set out at Itchen Valley Country Park, which will take effect from the 1st of January 2025. Approve the allocation of £18,000 from developer contributions to carry out essential tree works at Itchen Valley Country Park. 2 new bins have been installed on Chamblehurst Lane and Wilden Lane by the bus stop. And finally, 2 more to note, the expenditure of £782 from the revenue budget again to install the metal barriers on the alleyway between Barfoot Road and Charthouse Way. And then finally to note the good news stories as highlighted in Appendix 2. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Ross. And I have to say, it's really good to see those achievements in the photographs that you've put to your report as well, and what's been achieved by this committee, and obviously the officers, what they've done too. Right, so are there any councillors' questions on this one? Yes, Councillor Kyrle.
Just very quickly, actually, it's not a question. Just wanted to say thank you very much indeed for arranging for the installation of the fencing at Orchard Close between the allotment site and the residence property or whatever, which I know has been a contentious issue for a couple of years now, in fact, actually, and I know both Dave and myself have been involved in that, as indeed have others, so I very much appreciate, albeit it may be a relatively small amount of money, it has had a very big impact, etc., and it has helped both of us, I think, sleep better at night, I think, to be honest with you. So thank you very much indeed for that.
Thank you very much. Yes, Councillor Corben.
Just while we're doing that, my £782. Ross, I'm very grateful, not mine, I don't mean it like that, but for the railings in Barfoot, but also the speed that it was done as well. I think yourself and officers pulled out all the stops for that, because that was brought to our attention about the old rotten ones that when we went round, I lifted it up. It actually was well past end of life, wasn't it? And we got those fitted within 2.5 weeks or something like that, so the residents are pleased. I think the police are pleased as well, although they won't say it, but it has helped potentially helped the antisocial behaviour and the drug issue that was there. It's probably moved it on to somewhere else, but fingers crossed, Barfoot and Charterhouse it looks much better. And so it's not just the spending the money, it's the speed that it was done and the professional way that the team did it as well. So really good stuff. Pass on thanks, please.
Thank you very much. Yes, Councillor Gomer.
Thank you. With respect to the £18,000 of developers' contributions, can someone tell us what those developers' contributions are hypothecated for? What else could they be spent on?
Apologies. It's definitely geographically within the area, but I can't tell you what it was earmarked for in the past. It might be to do with green and open space, but I'd have to double check that. It is on a report I can find, so I can cover that back off as an email, if you'd be happy with that, Richard.
Yeah, so my concern is either developers' contributions from development in West End, but effectively our capital funding that we spend once being sucked up by the revenue budget of the country park, which benefits the whole borough, possibly to the £18,000 expense of West End, when actually I'd have thought, as I've expressed in email, the business of managing trees should be core to a country park, and I still don't understand why we're being asked to cover that cost. So I don't think I could support that allocation of developers' contributions until I understood what actually the sort of corresponding impact is on what we've got to spend on other projects in West End.
Well, obviously not too sure exactly if the country park has a budget or they take it out of HEWEB's money. I believe that, am I right in saying that Lakeside is covered by ELAC? Am I right in saying that?
At this moment in time, yes.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. In which case,
Well, yes, if there was tree problems there, they would come straight to ELAC, as we have across all of the areas. We've had Telegraph Woods last year where we had to spend an extra £6,000 of monies from our reserves to cover those costs. There's certainly an issue with trees going down that have been under budgeted in certain areas, and some of the local areas have to pick up that slack sometimes, but I appreciate what you're saying about using DCs. It was either that or using our reserves potentially. You know, that's not sustainable to keep coming out of our reserves to pay for this. So that was the other option I could offer.
Yeah, so this is a bit of a knotty issue really, in that the country park is fully devolved to the area committee. So absolutely everything to do with the finances of the country park are the responsibility of this area committee, not any other bit of the council. So if there are works that need to be done, we either have to fund them through revenue or we fund them through capital. If it turns out that we're not actually budgeting a big enough revenue budget to actually manage the trees properly, then we ought to be, for next year or future years, be looking at our revenue budget afresh and actually spending a bit more on tree maintenance at the country park or whatever else there might be, and a bit less on something else. And that then is a revenue pressure for us to think about. Because the alternative, as Richard said, is we end up spending developer contributions, which would be used in the round, generally speaking, just for West End area if they come from West End. So this is a little bit of West End subsidy of HEWEB. If we look at it in terms of geography terms as opposed to governance terms, so maybe I don't know whether we are going to agree this. I'll vote for it. But if we are agreeing for this, what we should be doing is actually looking to see whether the budget for IVCP is actually big enough to do the stuff they need to do on an ongoing basis, and considering upping that and reducing something else.
yes, I've always thought that Asian Valley Country Park is enjoyed by a lot of people, not necessarily in our area, but people from outside the area as well. And if the cost was to fall on HEWEB, was that really fair? Yes, sorry.
And back on that, because the answer is don't devolve any of the budgets and let the cabinet decide everything. So I would suggest we probably wouldn't want cabinet to decide everything about Asian Valley Country Park. We'd want it determined by the local members, the 12 of us here. That's the choice, really. We've taken a view collectively as a council over the years that Lakeside is basically mainly in ELAC, mainly for ELAC residents. Not entirely, of course. I mean, in the same way that Hedge and Town Council's paddling pool is used by residents from Burslem and Thornhill Parish, I thought, as a matter of routine. But the governance sits with the most appropriate local body that's closest to the people. So that's the balance we've come to. We can always revisit that if we disagree with it, if we think that on balance that Lakeside and Asian Valley Country Park should be corporately managed and corporately funded. That's a legitimate consideration for this committee and for ELAC to take. I personally wouldn't support that because I think we're better placed to take those decisions than Cabinet are.
Yeah, the only thing I'd say as well, I think this cabinet have been funding tree issues and tree works for a number of years. It's nothing new for HEWEB. It's just been a considerable amount more this year. So there's been £4,000 to £5,000 per year coming at a request to you guys to fund, which has been, as Keith highlighted, sort of paid for by this committee in the past, but probably out of reserves. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ross. So with these recommendations, if members wanted to agree, we could remove the £18,000 from the list of recommendations. I don't know how you would feel about that, Councillor Gomer, Councillor House. Yeah.
How urgent is it that the country park get this money? Because I don't want an ash tree to fall on someone, obviously. But equally, if we have the time to look into it in a bit more detail and come up with a more sustainable plan, I'd prefer that.
So I know the manager there is looking at other quotes, and 18,000 is the top end, and it may come down quite a bit. He's kind of, I shouldn't be saying this in public, but probably coming down a bit more than £18,000, and that was quite late in the day. This was after my report was published. The areas they've highlighted are close to where people walk. They've done their best as a team of what they can do. They do need a specialist to come in and do it. I don't know how urgent it is, and I can find that out quite quickly and come back. Sorry?
3 months priority for those trees to go, and it's been over a month now.
Okay, so that if that's the case, then there's still 2 months left to fill them. That would coincide with January, but it could be done via email potentially, if it was more appropriate.
Okay, I think maybe this is a discussion to have at another time as to how the funding goes for Itchen Valley Country Park. I think we need to discuss that separately. So at the moment, if the tree works are absolutely necessary, and this is the only way that they're going to be able to do them, I think maybe we should still include this and have that discussion at a later date regarding funding and how the budget works for Itchen Valley Country Park. So what I'm going to say then is, is there any further debate before I move on anyway? No? Okay. So what I'm going to ask then is a proposer to approve the recommendations as set out here in Ross's report. Do I have a proposer, please? Thank you, Councillor Pretty. Do I have a seconder? Yes, thank you very much. Councillor Corben. All those in favour? Right, that's unanimous. Thank you very much. Right. In that case then, councillors, I'm just moving on to item 12, which is planning appeals, and I'm just going to ask that we note those appeals, please. Thank you. No objection to that? Right. So I'm going to take this opportunity to thank you all very much for coming along this evening, and I think we've had a very good meeting, quite interesting, especially around trees and various other subjects. So our next meeting is actually due to be held on Monday, the 27th of January at 7 p.m. here in the Bury Theatre. And as that will be after Christmas, I'm going to wish you, probably maybe I'm the first person to say this to you, I'm going to wish you all a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Thanks, sorry, I just had to do it. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, and I'll close the meeting.